English sheepdogs years ago, and that was sort of a college type thing. It was made extra money during college.
You're swinging.
Sorry.
I'm just trying to help you out.
Okay. And the way we do this, I should explain. We take this and cut it. You know, I'll take pieces, and so if you want to start over, no problem at all.
Okay. I actually bred Old English sheepdogs when I was in college many years ago, and my parents are breeders. So when the recent legislation came down, I was the first person they called naturally to find out what their rights would be, what they could do, what impact it would have on them. And it just snowballed from there because, you know, obviously that's their industry. They know a lot of people in the industry, and that's how I became involved.
Okay, so who do you represent now?
There's a coalition of probably, I can't give you an exact number, but more than 100 breeders who I represent.
Okay, and so they pay you, the coalition does?
Yes.
Okay. Some of the breeders at the Administrative Rules and Government Oversight Committee said that you didn't represent them. There's some confusion about that.
There was. Thea King is the president of Oklahoma Pet Professionals. And I would assume that as president she was speaking for her organization, and she was correct. I've never been retained by Oklahoma Pet Professionals. However, some of their members are people who I represent.
Okay. So what have you learned once your parents called you and you started looking into it? It seems like you feel like this new law is too far overreaching. Can you explain that?
The new law, 1712, that was passed into legislation last year, I don't know that it was too far overreaching. It created an administrative agency. And this administrative agency would be charged with creating rules and regulations that would govern pet breeders in the state. And that's where the problem truly began, was with that board and the rules, the original rules that they promulgated. Some of their rules were blatantly unconstitutional.
So what have you done through this whole process?
Well, I've advised my pet breeders, my clients, to take part in the administrative process, to make their comments during the comment period, which was last November, to attend the meetings of the Board of Commercial Pet Breeders, to be on the agenda to speak at these meetings, and beyond that point, after promulgation of the rules, to stay in contact with their legislators, the House of Representatives and their senators, and let them know what their thoughts are, and let them know how these things will impact them, and give the rationale behind their thoughts and ideas.
Okay. A lot of people feel like some of the meetings have gotten out of control and too heated, and that there's not a lot of rationale that's presented. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
The only meeting that I know of that you could be referring to would have been last Wednesday. And it didn't get out of control, in my opinion. I was asked to leave the meeting, and I refused. I stated that I had a First Amendment right to speak. So the Sergeant-at-Arms was called, and she removed me from the room. The official reason that I was removed was for the use of profanity. Now, the profanity was this. Why in the HELL are the rights of animals more important than the rights of children? I had been speaking for just a few seconds at that point, and I was allowed to go on speaking. I was not actually asked to leave the meeting until I called the integrity of the Board of Commercial Pet Breeders into question. And that's when they tried to kill my mic and couldn't. And they called for the Sergeant-at-Arms to escort me out of the room.
And so how did you call the board, the integrity of the board into question? What did you say?
I said that there are animal rights activists on the board. I named a couple of names, and I'm told that after I left, one of those people was received 4 apologies, while the other one received no apologies.
From, I guess I don't understand. one of those people received apologies?
For my behavior. From the president of OKPP, the Oklahoma Pet Professionals, from Brian Reniger, one of the co-authors of the legislation, from George Faught, who is the chair of the committee and the person who ultimately ejected me from the room, and I'm not sure who the other apology was from.
Okay. And so who the other person that didn't receive any apologies was that Sue Ann Ham?
No, that was Angel Soriano.
Angel Soriano, so nobody apologized to him. Do you apologize for your behavior?
No, I do not.
Why not?
Because I have a First Amendment right to speak. The only parameters that were put on the speakers of that meeting were that your name had to be on the list and that you could not go beyond 4 minutes. Someone actually timed me, and I was allowed to speak for 1 minute and 30 seconds before the Sergeant at Arms appeared. So, my First Amendment right was violated in that I was not afforded my right to make my points of view known to my representatives. In such a short, in 1 minute and 30 seconds, I was not allowed to get my point across. I was not allowed to make my point, which was ultimately that we are wasting time and money on ineffective legislation that will have negative consequences on this state.
Jennifer, can I reset my shower with you? Switch up a little bit here.
Am I wiggling too much?
No, you're fine. You're doing a great job, actually. I just like to mix it up a little bit so it doesn't look like the same perspective every time.
That's okay. So when you were, but they said that they asked you to leave because you used profanity, and that being the word hell, right?
Hell, yes.
Okay. So why would you choose to use that kind of language, and do you think that it did more harm than good?
No, I don't. I don't know that I chose to use that kind of language. It certainly wasn't premeditated. It was just an example of the passion that came out that day. I made a promise to my clients that I would fight this to the bitter end, win, lose, or draw, that I was in it with them to the end, and that's what I've done. I was very frustrated that day because a story that I prefaced that statement with was actually a true story about a little girl in Oklahoma who cannot get justice. And I just think that it is ridiculous, and I think that it is, it makes no sense for our legislature to be spending this kind of time and money on ineffective legislation when there are more important matters to be dealt with.
Okay. In that meeting, it's my understanding that, I don't know who it was, but somebody called the board Nazis. Is that right?
It happened after I left. If it happened, I don't know. I can't speak to that.
Okay. But regardless, it got pretty heated and out of control. And that, I mean, is this kind of, to me, it just kind of seems like this is where we're kind of down at the end of the deal, and emotions are flaring. I mean, can you kind of elaborate on how you see that?
Well, this stands to put people out of business. While I recognize that there are puppy mills in this state, not all pet breeders are puppy mills, and the legitimate pet breeders, they stand to lose their business, they stand to lose their homes, they stand to lose their way of life. I've had some who've told me that they've looked into moving to other states because they just can't deal with this. I've had many who are going out of business. And at the end of the day, all of that's going to do is propagate more puppy mills. If you put the legitimate breeders out of business, then the only place to get a puppy is from a puppy mill or from another state.
What is it specifically that will put these breeders out of business? Because it's my understanding that the rules have been changed completely from the beginning.
The rules are still being changed. We still don't know what the final result is going to be. Would you repeat the question?
What is it exactly that's going to put these breeders out of business?
Well, there are some things in there, such as so many parts per million with respect to the air quality. The board is trying to require that these animals have more pure air than most humans have in their homes. I mean, and these would be $20,000 air purification systems. They are. There is a regulation as to how many times you can breed your female dogs. I've heard many veterinarians, including Brian Renniger, speak about that, and it's not in the best health of the animals to do what they're proposing that these breeders have to do. Which is not breed their females more than 2 times in 18 months, which would be 1 lost breeding cycle. And a veterinarian would have to give you the specifics of all of that. But I've heard numerous veterinarians say that when you have a breeding female like that, for her uterus to go empty for a cycle, it actually does harm to her body because she still produces the estrogen that would go into those puppies and the creation of those puppies, and that estrogen has to go somewhere, so it goes back into the dog, and that's not in her best interest. Mm-hmm. It's not healthy for her.
Mm-hmm. And so how would that put the breeders out of business?
Well, that's 1 litter of puppies from every breeding female per 18 months that they would lose. Some of these animals sell for $1,500 to $2,000 a piece. If you have a litter of 8 and you have 10 to 15 dogs, that starts to add up. That's a lot of money that we're talking about. Additional restrictions and regulations would require remodeling of $200,000 kennels. People who have built kennels that cost more than their homes, and those kennels won't pass the regulations. They would have to be completely remodeled, complete with air purification systems and heat and air and a whole host of things.
So the air purification is still in the rules at this point?
It was until last Wednesday, and at this point, I don't know what's in the rules and what isn't in the rules. Last Wednesday, HJR 1047, I believe, removed that.
Okay.
I'm not
so
sure
is there anything left that you guys disagree with?
Honestly, until I see the final result, I can't tell you if I agree or disagree. The USDA inspected and regulated licensed breeders have been exempted from these rules, and that was a step in the right direction. The rules will still impact hobby breeders, non-licensed, USDA licensed breeders, because they don't run the size of operation, that our USDA inspected breeders would run. And to be quite frank, I've told my breeders who are not USDA licensed, the time has come. You will be regulated by someone, whether it's the USDA or whether it's the state of Oklahoma. You will have to be regulated by someone. And in 6 to 7 months of dealing with this on a daily basis, I've never had one breeder who said, I don't want to be regulated. Not one. They do believe that they should have the choice. If they choose to be federally regulated, then they should be allowed to do that.
Many people feel like the breeders have gotten it